Federal government and state officials go head-to-head over immigration enforcement. The Justice Department has started issuing subpoenas to top officials as part of its investigation into anti-ICE protests. Here's what we know.
The standoff between the federal government and state officials in Minnesota is escalating. The Department of Justice has now started issuing subpoenas to Minnesota officials as part of its investigation into anti-ICE protests, some of which have turned violent. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey's office told the Epoch Times it has received a subpoena. It came after Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem accused Frey and Governor Tim Walz of encouraging, impeding, and assault against federal law enforcement. In a post on X Tuesday, Frey said when the federal government weaponizes its power to intimidate local leaders for doing their jobs, every American should be concerned. Walz's office did not respond to a request for comment, but in a statement on X, the governor called the ongoing investigation a partisan distraction. Meanwhile, Border Patrol boss Greg Bovino stressed the importance of immigration enforcement in Minnesota to the Trump administration. At a press conference yesterday in Minneapolis, Bovino said what happens in Minneapolis is directly connected to what happens at the border.
Border enforcement and interior enforcement are two parts of the same mission. A secure border without interior enforcement leaves communities vulnerable. And interior enforcement without border control is unsustainable.
Bovino said federal agents had arrested more than 10,000 criminal illegal aliens in Minneapolis since the start of the second Trump administration, and more than 3,000 of the worst offenders in the last 6 weeks alone. Even as tensions between state and federal government escalate, President Trump says he doesn't yet need to invoke the Insurrection Act in Minnesota. Trump's comments come after he earlier said he could employ the powerful tool to aid immigration enforcement officers in the state. The Insurrection Act allows the president to deploy the military when federal law enforcement becomes impossible through regular means. In an interview with News Nation yesterday, Trump said invoking the act would make life a lot easier, but he didn't think it was needed at this point. In that interview, Trump also addressed a controversial protest in which demonstrators stormed a Baptist church in St. Paul, accusing one of the pastors of being an ICE agent. He accused Sunday's protesters of being paid agitators.
And then you have the agitators, anarchists. I watch sort of everything. I see it all. And I see people screaming, shame, shame. This is not people that are like living in Minnesota. These are professional, paid people. They're like actors.
That incident is now under federal investigation. DHS says there are more than 2,500 federal agents currently on the ground in Minnesota. Officials are now saying an additional 1,500 could be on their way in the coming weeks.
Fraud in focus on Capitol Hill. Independent journalist Nick Shirley, a former fraud investigator, and other witnesses testified on the massive fraud scheme in Minnesota. The witnesses say warning signs were in the air long ahead of the federal government crackdown. Officials say about $9 billion in tax dollars were likely stolen. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has the story.
House lawmakers on the Judiciary Committee further exposing the billion-dollar fraud scheme in Minnesota.
These fraudulent actions have robbed taxpayers